When Americans vote in the general elections come November, the presidential race won't be the only contest on the ballot. In the U.S. Congress, all 435 House seats are up for election on November 3rd, with roughly 70 competitive districts. And in the Senate, 35 seats are at stake, including 2 special elections. Further down the ballot, state legislatures are also up for grabs. And both Democrats and Republicans say this is where some of the most consequential races will be held.
2020 is a do or die election at the state legislative level. In 2021, state legislatures in 35 states will redraw district boundaries at both the congressional level and the state legislative level.
42 state legislative seats could swing Congress by as much as 136 seats. So what we've focused on is taking a look at this from a redistricting standpoint of what are the key states where the legislatures are going to draw the maps.
An election year like this only comes around once every 20 years. In November, voters won't just be deciding who will be president. They'll be deciding which state lawmakers get to redraw congressional and state legislative lines in their party's favor.
We're going through the census right now, and post-census reapportionment. And that's when we're going to have a reallocation of the congressional seats and the redrawing of the lines. And when that happens, they're supposed to be in place for 10 years. So that means what happens in the November 2020 election will determine what Congress looks like for the next decade.
We were going into this election, we've been building for it for 4 years, knowing that this was the critical pre-redistricting election. Legislative boundaries, congressional boundaries will be redrawn. Voting rights for the next 10 years will be established.
Democrats are trying to take a page from Republicans, who began building power on the state level a decade ago.
The Republicans focused on this so well in 2010. They had their Project Red Map. They spent $30 million to DLCC's $10 million in 2010. And now we're set to outspend the Republicans. The path to 270 electoral votes runs through the states. And there's a real connection from the state house to the White House. As a party, we've neglected this, especially when presidential campaigns have been on the ballot.
I'm here to tell you, if they try and emulate what happened in 2010 and they just try and repeat Red Map, they're going to fail more miserably than they failed in 2010, because this is a completely different election cycle. It's a completely different map, and it requires a different strategy.
One thing neither party planned for was a coronavirus pandemic. But political operatives see a silver lining.
What you see around you right now is everyone understands the power of government. Everyone understands what government can do right. Some people are starting to see what government can do wrong. It's an awakening for people.
To address the many different challenges this virus presents.
Candidates who would normally be out knocking on doors and holding fundraisers have had to stay in their homes.
Good afternoon, Facebook family.
Both parties say their candidates have been texting, Zooming, and calling a lot more these days.
Take what you would have spent on a coffee treat for the afternoon and send it right over to my campaign.
Because it's easier to get people because they're at home. It's hard to raise money for candidates right now, but it's easy to pick up the phone and call voters all day.
Online revenue did continue to come in because, as I said, people were very angry across the country about the bungled Republican response. And folks had more time on their hands to read the fundraising emails, to answer their telephones. So we said, if you're a legislative incumbent, your priority is to serve your community right now.
For incumbents, campaigning looks like doing a great job. It looks like making sure that everything you're responsible for related to this pandemic that you're focused on right now, and you're putting that before politics.
But with so many Americans concerned about their health and their finances, will voters stay engaged?
Certainly in the Wisconsin election, progressive and Democratic voters were willing to risk their lives to vote in the state Supreme Court election. So we were able to win that election in part because Democratic voters were that motivated to vote. And I think that's a reflection of what we'll see throughout the 2020 election cycle, with Democrats being fired up and furious.
The one problem the Democrats have right now is going to be unity behind Joe Biden. And he's got to continue to unite progressives behind him. But on the Republican side, I feel confident in the enthusiasm that we've got, the support that the president has at the top of the ticket, driving that enthusiasm and that intensity.
With so much at stake in November and so much uncertainty, no one is making any predictions just yet.
What did you do during this moment? And that's truly what I think the fall election will be about.
I'm just not convinced yet that this election is going to be determined by the response to coronavirus. I think there are going to be other things that play out, and other things that people are going to make decisions on, because everybody knows how unprecedented this is.